I've got a really nice attacking game to show you, played by Judit Polgar when she was just 13 years old. After my video celebrating Judit's 50th birthday, I received a really nice email from Jan de Ruiter, who related a very nice story about Judit. So I quote from his email. In 1990, I was a member of a chess club in the city of Nijmegen in the Netherlands called UVS. It was a small, nice and cosy club. Our first team was nevertheless competing in the Dutch national club competition. One of the top clubs in the Netherlands at that time was HSG, Hilversum, and they'd enlisted Judit Polgar for their first team. Now, according to the schedule of the Dutch Chess Federation, a match was planned on the 3rd of February 1990 between our club UVS and HSG. This will be a home match for us, but HSG was very snooty and argued that because a superstar like Judit Polgar was going to be playing, we, being a lowly club, would not be deserving of the publicity and unable to handle the security of a chess event where someone as famous as Judit Polgar was playing. So they argued it should obviously take place at their club. But of course, we would have none of that. Rules are rules. So we protested and won the case. We booked a big event hall for the large crowds we expected and organised semi-professional commentators and professional security. I was assigned to be responsible for Judit's well-being during the day and therefore was at her side the whole time. I remember having interesting conversations with her during lunch about what it was like to be a chess celebrity. She was playing against our club champion Hans Klip. I'd always looked up to him, so I was very curious about what would happen during the game. To my astonishment, she completely obliterated Hans with a short series of frighteningly aggressive moves. I remember feeling a bit sorry for him. After the game, I asked her to sign this score sheet. This wasn't one of the actual score sheets from the players, but written by someone from the club who was relaying the moves to the commentators. But anyway, you can clearly see Judit's signature. So thank you, Jan, for that story. And let me put this game in context. So it was played in February 1990. Judit was 13 years old, and she'd already made her first Grandmaster norm in 1989 and had broken into the world's top 100 players. So, I mean, that shows the kind of prodigious talent that she had. I mean, now that would be extraordinary. Then, that was incredible. This game shows Judit's great desire to seize the initiative and to attack the enemy king. Her opponent, Hans Klip, at the time was an FM. In fact, later on became an international master. But I think he rather played into Judit's hands by trying out an offbeat variation of the Spanish, and Judit was very much at home in these kind of complications. Judit opened with her favourite e4, and now not the King's Gambit, but the Spanish. And Hans went for bird's variation. So this is a speciality of his. I've seen in database he's played it quite a few times. And this is named after Henry Bird, who was an Englishman in Victorian times who liked to play these kind of offbeat lines, and he championed this variation. It has a slightly dubious reputation, but it's not so bad. And it's tricky. So you can play knight f6 here, but Hans went for d5, and he's played this on quite a few occasions actually. So the bishop gets knocked off this lovely diagonal, but white gains a lot of time. You can see that white has already castled. This rook is ready to enter the game. And look at black's pieces still on their starting blocks. So this is a provocative way to play against anyone, but against Judit, wow, you're running a risk. So Judit went for queen e2, which is a decent move. Later on, Kasparov and others played rook e1 check and then c4, and the computer rather likes this for white. But I'll leave you to investigate that if you're interested. Anyway, queen e2, also a decent move, and then rook e1. So you can see that black has a basic problem here. How is the king going to emerge when there's such a traffic jam here and the pressure is on? Hans took on b5. Later on, he played a6, which the computer thinks is okay for black, and he even managed to win a game in that variation. But on this day, he exchanged on b5, queen d7. Now, of course, no queen exchange from Judit. She played this very provocative move, queen c5. Now, I wonder if she knew previous games with this move, because I mean, looking at my database, there's a game that goes back to 1934, played in the Soviet Championship, which was played like this. I mean, who knows? So it's provocative because, you know, white's queen is roaming around in enemy territory. d3 played, so that's a tricky one. So this aims to kind of clog up white's development on the queen side. But typically for Judit, she did not take on d3 because that would slow things up. Instead, she just developed a piece, knight c3, and that has a very nice feel to it. Just bringing a piece into the game, and who knows, white might like to take on d5, exploiting the pin on the e-file. If pawn takes pawn, then white would just play d4 and start developing, and no doubt this pawn would drop in due course. But now an extraordinary move from Hans. He played king d8, my word. Again, this is incredibly provocative. But it's been played before. Remember, I mentioned this game played in the Soviet Union in 1934. This is exactly how that game went. And in fact, the computer thinks this is still okay. Black is still on an even keel. So the Soviet game went queen d4 here. But Judit just took on d3, and that looks right at this point. d4. Okay, that pushes the knight into the middle. And knight c6. So unmasks the bishop, attacks the queen, and the queen swooped across the board, checking the king. And the king stepped across, king c8. And yeah, the computer still thinks that black is all right here, in spite of being a pawn down and this king staggering around in the middle of the board. a3. So takes away the b4 square from black's pieces and prepares b4. f5. I mean, this looks very provocative because it weakens squares on the e-file. Nevertheless, it's a good move because for the time being, the knight is rather shut out of play. Now, I know it can come back into the game perhaps via e2, but still, for the moment, nothing's happening. So this is actually a very strong idea. So far, so good from Hans. b4. Nevertheless, I would take white any day of the week here, considering the position of black's king. You know, at the moment, black's rooks are split, and we know how dangerous that can be. In fact, the computer thinks that black is fine after a6. Wow, I mean, I'm shocked that the assessment is still basically equal. Bishop e7 played instead. Queen f4. Actually, this pushes the queen back to where it really wants to be. It's on a far better square here. where it's looking in this direction, but also it can possibly bounce round to the queen side. Bishop c7. I think this is an understandable decision. Basically, Hans is sort of packing defenders around the king, but actually it's not great. Now white is starting to seize the initiative. You know, rook is coming to the c file, and it's going to be tough to defend this one. And after this next move, this really is just too loose. Minor pieces need solid support. And again, a6 was really the only way to go. Although, I mean, I think white has a nice initiative now. But this is way too loose. Queen e2, f4. He spotted an idea. Basically, Hans's idea, I'm guessing, must have been that after knight e4, then f3, and this starts to get a bit messy. But here is the point. Judit does not need to move that knight. Not yet. Rook c1. Good move. So the attack starts. So if pawn takes knight, then queen takes e5, and that is an absolute killer. Black can do this and play like this, but after, I mean, the king is just caught in a terrible crossfire here. After king b8, bishop takes pawn is a very nice move, and white is just crushing black there. Obviously, if bishop takes queen, bishop takes bishop, and you get the queen back. So after rook c1, king b8 was played, but after this next move, black resigned. Can you spot it? Rook takes bishop. Not too difficult. I mean, everything just kind of flows now. Yeah, black resigned. So why did black resign? Well, let's just take a look. So if, obviously, if king takes, then queen takes knight, check. Oh, that's crushing. And if queen takes, bishop takes d4. So this is just deadly. If pawn takes knight, then bishop takes and you win the queen. If knight c6, then bishop takes rook. And if pawn takes knight, well, this is decisive. Let's just go to the very end. So it's absolutely forced. And then rook here winning the queen. Or if rook e8, then this can just be taken. And rook e8 check threatened, so the king has to move, and then knight e4. Well, white is just a piece up with a winning position. So let's just leave the game there. That was the final position. Yeah, thank you very much to Jan for relating that story. I think it's a really nice snapshot of Judit Polgar in her youth.